Taia te kōrero, taia te wānanga, taia te pai pai wao. Kia uru mai rā koutou ki roto ki te ware kōrero e tū nei. Tēnei te pō nau mai te ao. Tēnā koutou, tēnā katoa tātou i roto i tēnei pō. Nei rā Che Wilson, mai te kaupapa o Che's Channel te pai pai wao. E me i atu ana kia koutou, tēnā koutou. Kia ora tātou. Kia ora everybody. Che Wilson here from Che's Channel Te Pai Pai Waho. And tonight, as we enter into our 7th Taite Talks, our Manuhiri is Ceara, and I'm going to hand over to Ceara to introduce who she is. And kei a koe, Ceara, nau mai, haere mai, welcome on board. Great to have you on Taite Talks tonight. I'm going to pass it straight over to you to introduce yourself, Ceara.
Tēnā koe, Che. No Ireland me ingarangi o ku tupuna, ko Bob Bickerton toku matua no Birmingham ia, ko McAuliffe toku whaia no Dublin ia. I whānau mai a hau ki whakatū ki te tau ihu a Maui. I nāianei ko whanganui a tara taku kāinga nō reira. Thank you for having me on Che's channel, Che. It's
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, and it's great to have you. I was with Ceara the other day at Te Papa, and I didn't realise that she followed the channel, and she says, "Oh yes, I follow the channel." Blah blah. And hey, do you want to be my manuhiri for Thursday for Taite Talks? And voila, we've got Ceara here, and just really good to have you on. And I'm going to hand it straight over to you for you to start asking some questions and see where our kōrero goes to. Kei a koe.
Cool, that sounds great, Che. Yeah, you asked me really fast. I feel like I just said yes, and then all of a sudden here we are. It moves fast. So yeah, I've been following your channel for a while. So and I'm always learning and so curious when your new videos pop up. And one thing that I'm really interested in is I guess I'm a traditional Irish musician, so I'm really curious about tonga poro and kind of your thoughts on perhaps the revitalization and just understanding a little bit more of your perspective in that sense.
Yeah, well, I suppose the first disclaimer is I can't play any instrument except for the spoons.
Oh, you can play along with me then with the Irish music, no problem.
And yes, born and raised playing spoons at all of the parties, all of the guitar parties. And but going to your question, if we think about the word puoro itself, oro being sound, and creation started with a sound. And as that vibration was sent out to the universe, it wasn't until it changed notes that you then got puoro. And once you got two sounds, you got the beginnings and the emergence of what then becomes the various sounds that make up music. And te puoro wairua is a phrase that we use. I don't hear it many places, but te puoro wairua is where your wairua returns back to. And it returns back to that original vibration, that original sound. And if we look at how Māori instruments have been created, a lot of them are pretty natural and don't require too much human intervention, except for, so you'll have shells and different percussions where there's not too much human intervention, but then you get the woodwind instruments, the pukaia, the putorino, etc., where there is a lot more work done to them. And then with the shells, the mouthpiece can then be elaborately decorated. But I suppose just to start things off, you've got Hinedo Katauri and other personifications of atua that are placed into these instruments, and those instruments have been underground for quite a while, but that's really because the guitar took over.
Yeah.
The guitar took over, the plastic poi took over from the reed poi, because the poi itself, some don't see it as an instrument, but it is a percussion. And so the plastic poi took over because it was easier to make, even though with the introduction of the poaka from Polynesia, then you could also use the pig's bladder to make a poi as well. Those usually had a good sound to them, as well as drying the eel skin. Again, a good sound to make those the poi. But yeah, just to kick things off, that's some of the things associated with Puro Māori. And as I said earlier, I'm not a musician of any sort. I love to sing, but that's it. Geez, I'm rambling. I've forgotten your question.
No, it's great. It sounds like there's sort of been a natural progression or evolution in some of the ways that the instruments are used and even created. And when you're referencing the poi, and I think that's a really interesting natural thing that's occurring. Is it? Is there any sort of effects around that? Is it,
Well, so for a long time, a lot of the instruments weren't played, and I'm not sure whether that was societal pressure or just that the chinka-chink took over.
Yeah.
Because, Māori say chinka-chink for a guitar, and Hawaiians will sing chalangalang for a ukulele. And the chinka-chink became so popular, as well as with church and the taking of parts. So that European influence of music, and I suppose pop music for each generation, popular music for each generation, just became the thing. What's interesting, though, is that because our history was recorded through song, we still maintain that even with a chink-chink.
Yeah.
It wasn't as more detailed, so that consistent thread stayed there. And I look at some of our whānau manuscripts, and there's a couple of manuscripts where there's there's over 4,000 pāo, and pāo are usually one or two liner, and they've really, it's a succinct and sharp witty way to capture a moment. And then where they've been captured really well, people sing them, but like nursery rhymes, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so the key thing is that the music captures the history. And so I know when I started taking over composition for my family, I've always made sure that, because we attend an Easter kapahaka competition, I've always made sure that when I was doing the mahi, that whatever historical event happened, we would mark it that Easter in our compositions. And if it was really important, we'd mark it no matter what, and just go, well, here's our latest song, or here's our latest haka or ngiri, and I'll do it. I'll use different forms depending on what the issue is. So when it was an eruption, I did both a ngiri and a haka, because there was an eruption at home with Ruapea. And even when there's a laha, I'll make sure that there's a ngiri to symbolise that point in history.
Yeah, and Che, is that so that I imagine it's communicating it to whoever's listening, but it's to keep that history alive. So would that be done again and again in the future and sort of act as almost a reference point back to that time?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's about recording it in a Māori way, even though you just Google it and it'll come up. But it's about ensuring that we record it in a Māori way so that we don't forget that art of
Yeah,
being oral culture.
yeah, and I think certainly thinking from the Irish history perspective, you see that coming through as well because especially with the songs, the emotions attached with the songs as well. So as opposed to reading lyrics on a page, you can hear the pain or hear the joy in the songs as they're sung, and so it helps people to connect to some of the, I guess, the realness of what it was like, as opposed to it just being static.
Well, that's it, and I think that's where one of our biggest challenges with our dirges, with our waiata tawhito and our apakura waiatatangi, our laments, is that we've started to sing them rather than waiata them.
Mm,
Because waiata is waiata. We've interpreted it to be song and to sing.
right.
But what we start to do is we add parts to our traditional style of singing when there's no such thing as flat in our traditional style of singing.
Interesting. And so I guess what is I won't even guess, I don't want to get it wrong, but what is lost when some of those key elements that were traditionally there may be lost because it goes into song form?
Well, yeah, that's a damn good question. I'm just thinking out loud. The vibration changes, and because we use the vibration to communicate with the unseen world, it's not that you can't communicate, but it takes a different form. And sometimes it might get you there quicker. Other times it might get you there, take a longer time to get there. And there have been times where I've sung both songs, both Chinka Chink Waiata and Waiata Tawhito, where you can still get to that divine space pretty quickly. But I do worry that if we try too much to take parts, and don't get me wrong, I love taking a part. But if we try to take parts in our traditional styles of waiata, I just think we run the risk of losing those forms.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a huge difference. Yeah.
And especially if people in your family have been professionally trained to sing, they naturally go that way, even when it's waiata tawhito. When it's a traditional form of waiata, they go the way that they have been trained.
Right. And so in your experience, where was that knowledge passed down? Was it from or
well, it was mainly in my kitchen, because mum and dad's kitchen, because as soon as we started school after the summer holidays, my Auntie Joan would come by mum, and Auntie Joan, did the words, and she'd work with mum with the tunes. And Auntie Joan couldn't sing at all. She couldn't sing. She couldn't sing Western songs, but she could sing Māori songs amazingly. And so that's where my first interest came, because you'd be going in for a kai, or you'd just be sitting there listening, or you'd be watching my auntie smoking in our smoke-free house and upsetting my mother, and um, and it was actually that which got me interested in waiata. And I realized pretty quickly, as I started to learn some of our traditional waiata, that, wow, this is where all the knowledge is kept.
Mm.
And so waiata is my thing. Waiata is my passion. And I've always been interested in learning waiata because of the history that it records. I got this question asked to me today by a cousin. She said, "What's the purpose of our maramatanga?" So that answers the answer for that's in the songs. That's why we need to learn the songs, because when you learn the songs, you then understand the why.
Yeah.
And what about you guys? What happens in Irish culture?
Well, not dissimilar to the kitchen. Irish music, traditional Irish music, it's not like classical music where you have the notes written down. That wouldn't really be the done thing traditionally, although some people might go to that now. More you're learning through osmosis, so you may hear a tune multiple times played by your family, or at different, we call them sessions, where you're usually in the pub. It's a real social thing. It's really like an extended family. And so you'd be growing up. I think I went to my first folk festival when I was about 6 months old. So you kind of grow up around the music, and then at a certain point the tune will just click. And I was actually thinking about Dan's Corridor that we heard the other day, and how you almost need to be able to hum a tune through or hear it in your head before you even go to pick up the instrument, or else the notes won't come. And so you'll see it was fascinating being in Ireland. We were visiting my uncle who's in Doon Queen, which is on the west coast, and you had kids who are about 10 years old, and they'd be in the session, and you, in an Irish session, you play a tune 3 times through, and then you move on to the next tune. And they'd listen for the first time. You see them at the fiddle, listen the first time through. The second time through, they might sort of, move their fingers a little bit. And the third time through, they'd play it through perfectly. And those were kids who were just like entrenched in the culture. So yeah, I think that's a key
by ear, right?
Yeah, all by ear. And I think that the one of the things that is really interesting is not dissimilar in some cases to here, I believe. The English confiscated all the instruments, so that, as one of the tools to kill the culture, taking the instruments away would help dampen that really quickly. So people started to a specific kind of singing where you would sing the tune as opposed to playing it on an instrument, so that you could keep the tradition alive and pass the tunes on through generations. And then when we got the instruments back, the tunes were still there. So that's just a little bit, I guess.
Well, and like that point, the difference for us is because we were a curiosity, and they wanted us to entertain. That's where we were probably fortunate, because entertainment became a form of maintaining culture. And the pew, which is the most common traditional form of dress, isn't traditional. The pew was created as a form of grass skirt, for where our tupuna created a form of grass skirt because that's what the visitors were wanting.
How interesting.
Because you look at the pew, it's not practical at all.
Yeah.
It's hard to sit on. It makes a shitload of noise if you're going to attack someone, but it's perfect for entertainment.
Yeah, that is a real difference, isn't it? Because it
Yeah,
does, yeah, it both keeps the culture, but adapts it from its original form, which is an
yeah,
interesting distinction, I guess.
yeah. And the first types of pew pew had a backing on them, which was the traditional form of rapaki. And they had the backing, and then it just had these tags on it. And then as they adapted it, oh no, we'll just make it and it swings better and makes a noise as well, which helps complement the song.
Mm.
And so those were some of the effects that happened with our waiata. But one thing that's really interesting, and I know it's similar in Irish culture and Welsh,
Mm.
is somebody can start a song and then the house explodes
Yeah. Yeah.
into a whole range of parts. So,
Yeah.
it's a pretty special thing, eh? And yeah, and because you take it for granted, it's just what it is, eh?
Yeah, and I love the connection that it brings as well. I'm sure you find the same, where you can immediately find your people very quickly by the
Yeah,
tune that you play. So, when I was overseas for a little bit, I went down to a pub and I didn't know anyone, and I was sort of like, oh, and I had the flute case, and then at a certain point, they'll suss you out for a while, and then at a certain point, they'll invite you in. And when you play a tune and everyone erupts, you know that you're like, oh, all right, I'm in. It's okay. And then you sort of form the connections from there. But it's a real sort of entry point into that connection is, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think if I look at the tunes of our traditional songs, they were always based on the sounds of the environment.
Mm.
And if you hear our traditional songs in Wanganui, they will often be a high pitch and will often be fast. And that's because of the speed of our rapids
Mm. Yeah.
and our prevailing wind has a high pitch whistle.
Interesting. So would you sort of know if you heard perhaps a player um, outside of your region and you heard that sort of specific tones and that sort of high pitched, would you be able to, if you had the knowledge, would you sort of know the sort of landscape that that person may have
Yeah.
learned around, or
And
yeah.
so people from the Bay of Plenty, the coastal space of the Bay of Plenty, I love their tunes. I
Yeah.
love their tunes because I can hear and I can see the gentle waves lapping on the beach as they sing. And it's just beautiful. And there's a couple of waiata that are sung from that part of the country, and I hear them and I go, oh, because where I come from, it's rough. The sea's rough, and you see it in our traditional taniko patterns on our cloaks,
Yeah.
where they're really tall and narrow triangles because it's representing the waves and how big they are. And you can tell a Wanganui Tāniko border usually because they're really tall and narrow because it's all about the rough west coast seas. But again, going back to the Bay of Plenty, you just hear the lapping of the sea as they sing, and it's just lovely.
Isn't that interesting how much landscape can affect everything, from music to art? I'm trying to think if we have similar in our tradition, and I think the landscape of the west coast of Ireland is huge in the language still being spoken and the music still being played, because what you get is a really rough landscape with really tall cliffs that shoot down to the sea. So actually, that was kind of the one part of Ireland that the English said, "Oh, we can't be bothered with that. It's too hard and rough to get there." So actually, that's where pockets survived, and that's
Yeah,
where the sort of revitalization have come from. So I'm not sure if it's not in the same vein, perhaps, although the musical styles change from region to region, but certainly has a huge impact on what happens today.
Yeah, and I've also noticed through Te Matatini, which is our big kapahaka competition, I've noticed that too many of the tribal variations are being lost because you win if you have a certain sound or style, which is incorrect, because some groups have maintained their style and they've got into the finals. But there's been a thought with some groups, oh no, we've got to change because our style's boring and we're not going to win. When actually, when you're strong in yours, just be that, and if you're disciplined and you are good, it'll reap its benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a massive influence there, but also, the influence of other cultures, not just the Chinka Chink, but you're having a lot of Polynesian tunes now, from the Pacific, influencing some of our waiata. And, in our family, because we've had a lot of chalangalang influence in our action songs since at least the early 80s. That's all impacted on things. So, yeah.
It's quite interesting. Would be a real shame to lose those regional differences, I guess. Yeah.
Very much so. And which is why when I pile, I make sure to just stick to our traditional form of pile from our area, unless I'm in another area and wanting to make a point, I'll use one of their styles.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll change if I want to make a point, and I'll take one of their tunes as a form of compliment.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And is that generally is that done outside of sort of your own practices? Would that be kind of a common thing to do to sort of show that respect?
I don't know. I just did it. Well, our style of whai kōrero speech making, pao traditionally is a key component of that. Making up a song on the spot is a key component of our traditional form of speech making. So yeah, I don't pile much. I don't pile as much as I should. But yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. I don't think we could do that quite on the spot at all.
When it's well practiced, it's just what it is. You get used to it. And karanga, when the women do their call, that's actually doing it on the spot. Yes, there's set words that you might say, but especially at a funeral, when you're expressing emotion, and you end up creating your own song sometimes as well. Like I know some of our kuia, when they do their wakatangitangi, generally known as an apakura, when they do that wakatangitangi, they it's just amazing, and it's succinct phrases, and they just capture that person well. And then at the end of all of the speeches, when we go over to shake hands, because our women then finish off and they do another call, when the men have missed something really important, the woman will say it at the end. And those ones who know how to do that, when they do it, it's just wow.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And it sits us on our butts as well because we forgot something.
right. With that, sometimes we talk about how the music comes to you as opposed to you. Like if someone composes a song or composes a tune, it wouldn't you wouldn't say, "Oh, I created this." You'd more talk about you're a vessel and the music came to you from somewhere else. Is that similar?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
like we've followed the Western form of who is the composer, but I come from a teaching where the composer is important because they are only a vessel. They are the manifestation of divine words.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wakatina nei te kupu. Yeah, wakatina nei te kupu, the manifestation of the divine inspiration, I suppose, and divine words. So and like all of our waiata, who wrote it wasn't important. It's the message that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? It's
Yeah. Lovely
something
to hear you. Oh, that's the same as us.
it's probably something that's potentially lost in some other areas. But I've always liked that framing.
Yeah.
It's just just a vessel. Mm.
Nice. Oh well, Ceara, tēnā koe. Thank you for agreeing just randomly at Te Papa the other day. Hey, you want to be my Manuhiri? Yeah, appreciate it. And was, to be honest, I was a little bit nervous because music isn't my thing. Wyatt
You're
is my thing.
nervous. Ah, no, I'm not nearly as nervous as me, Jay. I tell you what. No, thank you so much. I said yes at Te Papa before I thought through. But I'm so happy that I got to spend this time with you, and I've really enjoyed sharing and hearing more about some of the synergies and
Yeah.
just hearing more from you. So it's been really, really awesome. Thank you.
Awesome, tēnā koe. Nō reira e te iwi, I'll be back next Tuesday for co-host sessions, and then Thursday again for Taite Talks, where I'll have a new Manuhiri who I might meet on the road or I might just meet online. Nō reira, e mihi ana kia koe kei te tuahine, Ceara, mihi kauatua ana kia koe, mau I whakaro nui mai, kia eke ki runga ki tēnei kaupapa, ki te pai waho. Thank you very much for coming tonight. E te iwi, stay safe, stay warm, because it is a bit chilly. I can feel the snow back home. Stay safe, stay warm, and please make sure to go and vote. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Turuturu ohiti waka maua kia tīna, hui e, tai ki e. Pō marire.